WNYC Studios is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
Brian Lehrer on WNYC. And now we begin our live coverage of the City Hall ceremony for the Knicks as their championship parade up the Canyon of Heroes arrives at its destination. The ceremony is scheduled to begin at noon. With me to provide insight and analysis during our coverage is none other than William C. Roden, columnist for Andscape and the author of $40 Million Slaves, The Rise, Fall, and Redemption of the Black Athlete. He also directs the Roden Fellows, a training program for aspiring journalists from HBCUs. Bill, always great to have you on the show. Welcome back to WNYC.
Brian, how are you doing? Congratulations. I guess I could say that to you. You're a native New Yorker. Congratulations.
Total lifelong Knicks fan. Absolutely. What about you? I mean, you were a New York Times sports columnist for a long time, so a New Yorker for a long time. Do you have a rooting interest, or are you like, I'm a journalist, I don't say who I like?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird, man, and I've been wrestling with this. I'm addicted to the story. Everybody asks me, who are you for? I'm for the story. And it's kind of complicated. I grew up in Chicago. And when I was 16 years old, I think I was a fan of the Dallas Cowboys because they had just kind of started and all that. And they lost their second championship game to the Packers. And I was crushed. And I vowed there, I said, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm going to become a mercenary sports writer because I can't. I don't want to give my emotions to stuff I don't control. So, probably since I was 16 or 17, I wasn't a fan. This was the first time in my professional career when the home team, the city where I lived, actually won an NBA championship. So, it's a long-winded way of saying it's a great story. I'm glad that I was part of it. This is one of those times when I really wish, I could kind of tap into your inner New Yorker and really feel the full weight of the emotion that a lot of these fans really feel. I'm still kind of,
blown away by the level of it.
Well, it's New York. It's New York. But I mean, I was at the airport going to the San Antonio game, where the Knicks wrapped it up. And the woman who was checking me in was just head over heels Knicks fan. I think a lot of the people who were behind me were pissed off because she was just going on and on and on about how much she loved the Knicks. And I wish I felt that deeply about because it must be really extraordinary. But I was just wondering, how do you feel? I mean, you're a native New Yorker. You are an avowed Knicks fan. You're a journalist, not necessarily a sports journalist. So I'm just wondering, what is the depth of your emotional connection to this?
Well, I'm ecstatic too. I mean, I think I have sports sort of, in a perspective in my life, considering the heavy things about the world that we cover here every day and that I think about day in and day out,
Right.
and I have things going on in my personal life too. But it's still a beautiful, ecstatic moment, and I can lose myself in it and, cheer and walk around. I've been, I've been rocking my Knicks baseball cap that I've had for a long time but don't always wear around, and loving the connection. You wear a Knicks cap most of the time, and it's just another cap on the streets of New York. But in these weeks, strangers would point at my hat and say, go New York, go, or whatever it is. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, and I must say, I was in Philadelphia, Cleveland, and obviously, at the Garden when they were playing San Antonio. And I got to admit, again, because I love moments, when the Knicks were 29 points down, at the Garden, and I guess it was Game 4, and they made that incredible comeback. I was like, I wouldn't say I was ecstatic because it was just a great story and it was kind of unbelievable. And it reminded me, I was at the Super Bowl when New England was down, I think, 28-3 to Atlanta and came back. So, I love those kinds of moments. And again, I'm just blown away by the Knicks fans took over every single arena. They took over the Philadelphia arena. They took over the Cleveland arena. And they kind of almost took over the San Antonio arena. I mean, it was really, I will say this. I think this was the first time since I've been covering stuff that I can't say that the fans, in this case Knicks fans, really did play a significant part in the success of the team, because Knicks fans, and I guess because it's like the biggest city in the world or something, they really showed out. So it's really it's pretty remarkable. I'm like looking at the parade, and it's just it's just amazing. I'm glad I'm not there, but but it's a pretty incredible moment.
And listeners, we don't know exactly when the ceremony is going to start, so maybe we will have some time for a little more ticker tape parade of the air like we did earlier in the show. So if you want to say what you might be chanting if you were out there right now, or talk to Bill's point about the depth of feeling that you might have that surprised a lot of people, that the city is expressing it, with such joy and such emotion over this, 212-433 WNYC, or if you have school-age kids, did they go to the parade? Did you let them cut? Did you tell their principal? 212-433 WNYC, 433-9692. Call or text for Bill Rhoden from Anscape. You wrote an article called Knicks NBA Finals Victory Delivers a New Identity. What did you mean by new identity?
Well, and I thought about this, for Knicks fans, their whole ethos for so long has been long-suffering Knicks fans. And that has become sort of an identity that people embrace, like being long-suffering. And now I'm thinking it's going to be such a major shift you're a champion now. You're no longer a long-suffering Knicks fan. Your team has now won a championship. And I've got to think that, and the Boston Red Sox fans had to do that, because I think their thing was, the Cubs was like 101 years, and I think the Boston Red Sox was like 69 years.
Yeah, right.
And, and so I think as a fan base, you get into this whole thing of persecution, of being, fate is against us. And particularly in New York. Oh, man. Now you've got to develop a new identity. You're no longer a long-suffering Knicks fan. You've got to kind of somehow come up with a new identity, that you're now an NBA championship. So I'm just wondering how long it will take. What will they do now, next year? I mean, at what point will they, I don't know. And that's what I meant by identity, that you really have to shed the long-suffering identity and adopt the suffering is over. And, for a lot of people, remember, I know in sports teams, they say some teams it's hard to deal with prosperity. And maybe it's for some people like that, too, that you're so used to scraping and scuffling that when you have clear sailing ahead, it's hard to deal with. And I just think that for Knicks fans, and maybe, not necessarily maybe for the younger fans, but maybe for older fans, it'll be a challenge, I think, to embrace this new identity, because you grew up with this identity of being long-suffering. So where do you go?
Well, I hope the Knicks don't do, or the Knicks fans, I should say, don't do what the Red Sox fans did after they finally won in 2004. And I say this as somebody who was born in the Bronx and has been rooting for the Yankees all my life. Right. But they went from the aggrieved constant losers to the lording it over you. We're so much better than you. It's so obvious kind of baseball fans after that. But do you think it's different emotionally for players when they win on a team that's been through an epic multi-generational drought like this, or not really?
Yeah. I think that's a great question, Brian. And I think it's true. Towns grew up in New Jersey, and I think Brunson kind of grew up in New Jersey and went to Villanova and all that. No, I think that with this franchise, because it's the New York Knicks, it's New York City, I think the greatest city on earth, and knowing what this means and playing in the city, I think they absolutely, no matter this is a cruel business. The sports industry is a cruel business. You know, you're with the Knicks today, and 2 years from now, you got traded. You know, but I absolutely, and I didn't ask each player this, but I absolutely would bet that this really resonated very, very, very deeply to them as athletes, as competitors. Because when you win in this city, I remember Bill Parcells said that when you win in New York, the people will never forget you. You know, look at Clyde. Clyde's 81 years old, and you know he's still beloved. Though I asked him, I said, Clyde, this is before the Cleveland game. I said, Clyde, how do you think you're going to feel if Jalen Brunson leads the Knicks to an NBA championship? Do you feel that your stature will be diminished? And he said, no, because they'll say Clyde has two. But no, I think to answer your question, as hardcore as you kind of got to be in the sports business, I think for every single New York Knicks player, I think this resonates very, very, very deeply.
Let me take a call from Chuck in Marine Park, Brooklyn, on the emotion here. Chuck, you're on WNYC with Bill Rhoden from Manscaped. Hi.
Hi. In 73, we were 13. We used to shovel snow in Marine Park so we could play hoops. We're still playing at 70, 80 in Marine Park. We used to go for $5 to see a game and wrap a dollar bill around the ticket to get into the better seats. And $5 ain't going to cut it now, but we're still watching. When OG hit that tip in, I was calling all my friends. I felt like I was 13 again. It's just been amazing.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We're going to break for the news in a minute and come back with Bill Rhoden, and we don't know exactly when the ceremony is going to start. But real quick, any thoughts about San Antonio Spurs young star Victor Wembanyama? I feel like he went into the series, in at least the New York public's eye, as a 22-year-old, super talented, not just super tall at 7'4", phenom. You know, he could dribble, he could shoot three-point shots. Not a lot of the 7-footers in history really were as agile as he seems to be. But he came out as the villain who played dirty, dangerous, rough, on purpose, especially against Brunson. I'm just curious if you think Wemby's, in about 30 seconds, Wemby's whole kind of reputation changed through this series.
A little bit. Great question. Little bit. In fact, I wrote a column after they lost Game 4 that said Wemby needs to go to the Rucker. He needs to go up to Harlem and get a little added seasoning of the Rucker.
Rucker Playground, Rucker Park, where people play street ball.
Exactly. He needed to go up there a little bit just to get a little of that kind of seasoning, get heckled and be, people will be irreverent. Yeah, a little bit. I think he definitely, and we could talk about this, but I think he definitely learned a lot of lessons I think he walked out, didn't shake hands. I think from the time the series began until the series ended, I think he really took a hit. But at heart, he's a good guy. But yeah,
and he's young, and he can mature, too. All right, our coverage will continue after we get the latest news on WNYC.
WNYC is supported by New Jersey Performing Arts Center, presenting Herbie Hancock live on stage, Friday, July 31st at 8 p.m. Tickets and more information is available at njpac.org.
Wildland Trekking, an intrepid travel company. Wildland offers guided small group hiking trips to iconic parks like the Grand Canyon, Yosemite, Acadia, and more. Info at wildlandtrekking.com/WNYC.
This is WNYC. FM, HD, and AM New York.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. A preliminary deal between the United States and Iran is signed earlier than scheduled. Last night, President Trump and his Iranian counterpart entered into a 60-day ceasefire extension. Vice President J.D. Vance addressed that as he was leading the White House briefing a short time ago.
I would say the 60-day period officially started today. It was signed late, and it may have even been signed technically, because of the time shift. I think it's signed technically today, Iran time. So, yes, the deal started yesterday. We're going to start the 60-day clock today.
NPR's Greg Myrie reports both sides now face a complicated process of sorting out the terms for ending their war.
Iran's president signed the deal in his home country, while Trump did so at the opulent French palace of Versailles. Trump also issued this warning to Iran.
If I don't like it, if they don't behave, we'll go right back to dropping bombs right smack in the middle of their head.
The most immediate benefit of the deal should be the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, where the flow of oil has been largely halted for more than 3 months. Iran also pledges not to build a nuclear weapon, though the exact scope of the nuclear program must be worked out over the next 60 days in a final agreement. Iran will now be able to sell its oil freely, a major boost for its crippled economy. Greg Myrie, NPR News.
Many Americans say they don't feel good about the U.S. economy or about President Trump's leadership. NPR's Stephen Fowler reports on the latest NPR PBS News Marist poll released this morning.
President Trump faces his largest ever gap between those who approve of his job and those who don't. The disapproval is driven by nearly all Democrats, about 2/3 of independents, and 1 in 5 Republicans. When asked about how Trump is handling the economy, the numbers are even worse. Only 1/3 of Americans say they approve, a figure lower than any point during former President Biden's tenure. One reason, gas prices. Even though the average price per gallon has decreased by about 40 cents in the last month per AAA, 3/4 of voters say it still puts a major strain on their finances. Stephen Fowler, NPR News.
Proud and energized, crowds of people wearing Knicks jerseys and caps lining the route from Battery Park to City Hall to celebrate the team that brought home their first NBA title in 53 years. NPR's Brian Mann is in the middle of it.
I took a subway into Lower Manhattan around 5:30, and the car was already packed more than 4 hours before parade time. Huge crowds here where I am now, and everyone just big grins on their faces. This celebration, half a century coming for the Knicks. People say they're glad to be here.
It's NPR.
Support for NPR comes from DuckDuckGo, who believes that AI is hard to avoid right now. That's why they made a version of their private search engine without AI. Learn more at duckduckgo.com.
Yeah, it's the Brian Lehrer Show theme. We don't usually hear that at 4 minutes after 12 o'clock. I guess we can call it BL After Hours because I'm staying over to help lead us in to the ceremony at City Hall for the New York Knicks. This is live coverage of the City Hall ceremony as their championship parade up the Canyon of Heroes arrives at its destination. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at noon, so they're running at least a little bit behind, but that's just more of an opportunity for us to continue with William C. Roden, columnist for Anscape and the author of $40 Million Slaves, The Rise, Fall, and Redemption of the Black Athlete. Many of you knew him for a long time as a New York Times sports columnist. He also directs the Roden Fellows, a training program for aspiring journalists from HBCUs. And with you in our Knicks Championship Parade of the Air, 212-433 WNYC. And let's go to another caller who's been waiting for a while right away. Chelsea, Patrice in Chelsea, you're on WNYC. Hi, Patrice.
Hey, I have a 17-year-old who doesn't watch any sports, and now she does because of this. And she also is a very unique, personal, expressive dresser, and she disdains people who copy others. And now she doesn't go out without wearing orange or blue because she felt the pressure of everybody wearing it, and she even dyed her hair early this morning blue. And if she wears black and white, she's a little afraid because she thinks they're going to think she's a Spurs fan. And we were watching all together, which is another great thing with a 17-year-old. And she learned the artistry of the athleticism, and she was floored and became passionate and was just screaming at the screen. And I love that she was exposed to the teamwork being that tip into the end. And she's a musical theater buff, but her grandfather was a great college ball player, Malachi Duffy from Bonaventure University, and now she saw up close what her grandfather was capable of, and I love that, and I'm so grateful to the Knicks, and that's what I would hear. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Great story. Yeah, Bill, a few things there. First, orange and blue have suddenly become New York's colors. I told the story before of someone I know who has a kid in the public schools whose teacher declared Orange and Blue Day after they won the championship, and everybody was wearing orange and blue. Also, this kind of thing, it's true in media too, but I think with sports, this kind of very special event brings more people in permanently, like that caller 17-year-old who never paid attention to basketball before, but now is a fan.
Yeah, I wonder how she'll be this time next year. That's a cynic in me. This thing is so seasonal, and fans have incredibly short memories. What stood out for me, just as somebody's daughter, her dyed her hair blue. I'm like, what was that like? But I guess two things, and I guess I want to lean into the moment. People are saying how moments like this bring the city together and all that. And to an extent, it's true. I mean, I was listening to your Supreme Court conversation with a journalist, with the professor before. And I was thinking, I guess that's a role that sports can play. Kind of give us a break. Just kind of give us a respite, for a minute from all the uncomfortable news and the partisan news. And, yeah, this is a bipartisan moment. I do wonder, I think sometimes you can take it too far, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I think this is clearly a wonderful moment. It's a great moment. Knicks fans are going to be celebrating. I'm sure you had people who are independents and Republicans, not so much in the city, all celebrating together. I'm sure people in Texas don't care, but here it's a great feel-good moment, and it's a nice. It is a very nice. It's a nice respite.
Here.
I had a question for you, Brian. And I was actually talked out of writing this column. But how, I wonder, I've also been covering the World Cup, which presents a really fascinating cross-section. It's not a cross-section, an intersection where you've got the World Cup here at the same time that the Knicks are celebrating the World Championship. And I'm wondering, what would happen if the mayor would have a ticker tape parade for the World Cup champion? No matter
which country.
Yeah, whether it's Argentina or France or England, because the whole idea that we're in this, number one, to introduce soccer as really like we accept it on the world stage, and also the diversity that soccer and the fans bring. I just think it would make such a powerful statement in terms of globalization to give the first ticker tape parade for a sports team that's not a New York team.
I love that idea. Just yesterday I was in the laundromat I go to, and the owner, who's an immigrant from Ghana, was wearing a Ghana bucket hat. And so we got to talking about the World Cup, and I happen to really like that guy. And, yeah, of course, there is a Ghanaian community in New York City, and we could cite, of course, about 150 countries where there are communities in New York City. So I guess it would be a little challenging if Iran, right at this moment, wins the World Cup.
Yeah, we don't have to worry about that.
Although our president says that they're respectable people now. But that's another show. But but I love that idea. I love that idea. Here's a text from a listener that kind of is adjacent to that. You might have a thought about this. Has your guest ever asked an athlete what it might mean to play for a team based in a city like New York that has such a diverse fan base that reflects the team itself? This continues. There are so many black and brown Knicks fans. I've always wondered what it might be like to win a championship for a team like Oklahoma City, where the players are mostly black and the fan base, at least those who I can see in the stadium, are overwhelmingly white, compared to New York. Interesting question, Bill, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. New York is a very unique place. I mean, it turns to diversity. Last year I followed the finals, and it was in Oklahoma City. And you're right. But I think, number one, I think almost any player would love to win here, would love to play for the Knicks and win here. And I think that you're probably going to see, moving forward, more players wanting to come here. I mean, before it was, it's the pressure of New York, maybe it's the owner, the Knicks are losing. But I think because of this team, because of the fan base, I mean, this is an incredible and diverse fan base. But New York is a very diverse city. So yeah, I mean, I think that when the texter asked, had I asked athletes about playing here, almost uniformly, almost every athlete sees playing in New York as something different great, something different bad, but it's definitely an entirely different experience. And winning here is probably like nothing else. I mean, this is for the Knicks players. This is like times 10, because they're always going to be remembered.
And on this idea of connection with something larger than just the game, Mayor Mamdani was on the show on Monday for a few minutes to celebrate the Knicks win and preview the parade. And I don't know if you saw the essay that he wrote for the New York Times sports site, The Athletic, on why it meant so much to him to be an Arsenal fan, that soccer team. And here's a little bit of what he said to me when I asked him about that on Monday's show.
I was born in Uganda in East Africa, and Arsenal was one of the first teams to embrace African talent, and a lot of that was in thanks to its manager, Arsene Wenger. And there was this sense of familiarity even before I knew the team all that well, because it felt as if I was seeing a reflection of my childhood, my world, my dreams in that team, without the typical kinds of hurdles that one has to jump to prove oneself as a part of something bigger than themselves. And I think it's true for Arsenal, and I think it's also true for the Knicks, in that one thing that means so much to so many across the city is how they can see themselves in this team.
Mayor Mamdani here on Monday. That's striking a chord with you, Bill?
Yeah, no, I like that a lot, which is why maybe he would be open to hosting the World Cup parade in the city for the World Cup champion. He gets diversity. He gets the power of diversity. He gets the power of seeing yourself and how important it is to see yourself. So no, I thought that was a very powerful statement, and clearly he gets it. He's young. He kind of grew up. You look at his whole. From growing up in Uganda and then becoming the mayor of New York City, who would have dreamt that? So I think that's a very powerful message, and I guess sports can have that moment. When I say that, it's great that sports can sometimes fill a role of kind of taking us away from the partisanship and that kind of stuff. I do think that, yeah.
It's 12:15. The parade was scheduled. The ceremony, I should say, was scheduled to begin at 12 o'clock. They're running behind. I can see that the parade is still making its way up Broadway. Some people are starting to get onto the platform from which the ceremony will take place, or on which the ceremony will take place. So I think we're getting pretty close. But I think we can turn up some background sound of the parade coming up Broadway. Let's see if we can hear anything worth hearing. So, Bill, we can hear some drumming, certainly a lot of crowd noise, some chanting. I can't tell what they're chanting, but probably a lot of ecstatic chanting of various kinds as the parade moves up Broadway, right?
Yeah, let's go Knicks, or whatever,
Have you been in them in the past? Did you cover ticker tape parades as a sports journalist in New York?
I did. In fact, one of the Yankees championship. It may have been the first championship with Jeter. And I was
1996. That would be.
Yeah, and I was there. And what I remember from that most of all was that I was standing next to Tony Bennett, who I love, and we just had Tony Bennett, who I just loved as a singer. Oh, but he was just also such a down to earth guy, and he was a Brooklyn guy. And we just kind of had a little brief conversation about, I forgot what we were talking about, but I was just thinking, damn, I'm here talking to Tony Bennett, just very casually. And yeah, and that was kind of special because I think, as you know, as a Yankees supporter, they'd been in a desert for a while before winning that particular championship. But it didn't seem, in retrospect, like the intensity, it didn't have the intensity of this one, of the Knicks, I guess the drought. And I did, because I grew up in Chicago, when the White Sox won the World Series, and I forget what year it was, but when the White Sox won the World Series, I went back to Chicago. I don't know what possessed me, maybe that 16-year-old fan, but I went back to Chicago, and some kind of way they put me on a float, and I worked out, and I got to tell you, Brian, I remember thinking that every pro athlete needs to experience something like this to just understand the magnitude of what winning a championship would mean. Because it was an unbelievable experience to go through Chicago and see those thousands of people hanging out. So it was really remarkable.
Funny enough, you mentioned that White Sox championship year. I think it was 2008. And by coincidence, I happened to be going to Chicago for something during that summer, and I went to a White Sox game. And as they were becoming really good for the first time in a long time, and I felt the energy even in the middle of the summer, the excitement of just some of the people sitting around me who, I struck up conversations with, caring more than it seemed to me that people in New York at the moment were caring, maybe because the Yankees had won so much in recent years and the Mets never seemed on the verge. But you can feel it when there's been a drought. And it's funny that you bring up that one, because that was something that, as a very casual fan at one White Sox game in the middle of that summer, I think it was 2008, it was something I was able to feel from the people sitting around me.
Yeah, and I grew up on the South Side, and at that point, when you grew up on the South Side, you were a White Sox fan, because Mayor Daley, you were a White Sox fan, and if you're on the North Side, you were a Cubs fan. And I grew up, my dad was a teacher. They used to always get tickets to go to White Sox games. And so, that was really my first exposure to, to baseball. And of course, the Yankees were always just, whatever dreams we had, they would just step on them. In baseball, it was the Yankees. In football, it was the Green Bay Packers. They always just destroyed us. So, when they won the World Series, it was so powerful. And I guess there is, again, I don't want to minimize it, but there is there is a power in these moments, whether it's the Knicks, even last year with Oklahoma City, there was a power in Oklahoma City, a rallying around people. So there is a power in these moments that I wish that we could kind of bottle up and keep in terms of relationships and harmony.
By the way, our army of fact checkers reminds us that the White Sox won in 2005. The Phillies won in 2008, so check your memory, Lehrer. And here we go to Jim in Lavallette, New Jersey. You're on WNYC. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Brian, how are you? I've got an interesting little tidbit of information. So my son owns a liquor store in Lavallette Liquors, and he made 150 T-shirts. He got a special logo made, and we just thought it'd be kind of, timely. Anyway, he sold them out instantly. So we immediately ordered 150 more, and they sold out again instantly. So now when that ridiculous game where they came back from 29 points, he ordered 300 shirts, thinking they'd sell kind of, maybe through the whole rest of the series. He sold them in 2 days, 600 T-shirts in a little liquor store. It was just so much fun. And now if you were to call the store, nonstop phone calls, and we just don't have any more shirts. The amount of excitement over this team is insane. It's so much fun.
What did they say? What did the shirts say?
Well, my son made them. They're just AI made with our store name, but the Knicks logo. So it's got the ball with the orange V shape, and then on the top it has Lavallette Liquors. And then for some reason people love the connection. People are pretty
neighborhood,
territorial.
Store.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. However, now you're going to have 8-year-olds running around with a liquor store shirt. I don't know how I feel about that. We can see that Governor Hochul is seated on the platform. New York City Council Speaker Julie Menon is seated on the platform. The stage is nearly full now. So we're going to go to the ceremony any second, as soon as I get the high sign that it's actually starting. So making sure that I get a chance to do this, I want to thank again William C. Roden, columnist for Anscape and the author of $40 Million Slaves, The Rise, Fall, and Redemption of the Black Athlete. He also directs the Roden Fellows, a training program for aspiring journalists from HBCUs. You want to take what seconds we might have and talk about the Roden Fellows?
Yeah, and it's kind of related to this. The fellows, we just named our 10th class of fellows, and this is something that is supported by Anscape. Anscape is an ESPN vertical. But they spend the summer in Bristol, Connecticut. And I had the idea for them, since the Knicks were doing so well, why don't you guys come in the city and let's make this a project to come to Harlem. They did an interview with a young black woman that owns a coffee shop, said, I like it black. And then they went to the Rucker, then they went to Times Square, and then they went down to the Garden. And I think that they were really it was like blown away by just the excitement and the electricity that they felt. And this was before Game 4, I think, But basically what they do is each class, they'll spend the summer in Bristol just to meet and see people, and all the people at ESPN are great, the broadcasters and all that. And then when they go back to their respective schools, they become our on-campus correspondents. So it's a 1-year paid fellowship. And like I said, we just named our 10th class. And I'm actually having an event. This year marks the 20th anniversary of $40 Million Slaves. And on July 8th, I'm having an event at the Studio Museum of Harlem to not so much look back and commemorate the 20th anniversary, but kind of assess, where are we now, going forward. So, the fellowship has probably been, as you know, because you mentor people, it's probably been one of the most gratifying aspects of my career.
Well, where are we now? Would you like to remind people of the premise of that book? And that's how long we've been talking. You came on the show when that book was released for a book interview, and maybe say if anything has changed for better or worse or whatever since then?
Yeah, that's great. I've been trying to figure that out. If I was sitting down to write that book now, what would I write? What would be the new chapter? And ownership has not changed. I mean, ownership is power. And although numbers have increased in terms of black athletes, ownership is not. That there's no black ownership, majority ownership in football, in the NBA. Although there is a young black woman named Kwanzaa Jones, who this month could become the first black woman to own a Major League Baseball franchise, pending ownership. So obviously 20 years, some things have changed, but the overall structure has not. And then I think with a new administration coming in that seems hell-bent on eradicating diversity, erasing black history, neutralizing black voting rights, it just kind of shows you that we're like on a gigantic merry-go-round, that you go round and round and round, but when you stop, you get off. You kind of get off where you got on. You really haven't gone anywhere. So, and those are some of the things we're going to talk about. So where are we? Where are we now?
Have you paid attention to some of the politics breaking out in New York sports the last few weeks when Jackson Dart, the young quarterback for the Giants, went to a Mike Lawler for Congress rally and introduced Trump there, and then his teammate Abdul Carter, obviously black men responding to what a white man did, took issue with it publicly, and I don't know how much of a story that's going to still be when the Giants' actual season starts, but feelings were raw, and you can understand why.
Yeah. And I was actually encouraged by that, because one of the things I had thought is that, after George Floyd and you had so many, people, black, white, and indifferent, but particularly athletes getting involved. And then it seems like there's almost like a chill came over when people didn't really want to say anything. Everybody was very reticent. So I was thinking, man, this whole thing of activism is kind of dead. So I was very encouraged when Abdul Carter spoke up, because it just showed me that, and again, no matter who you're for, what are your politics, I was just encouraged that he was paying attention. And he was paying attention to the extent that he wanted to say something. And obviously he was, I think the majority of NFL owners are probably Republican supporters. But even at the press conference, Jackson Dart said what he had to say. And again, Dart is, in any player, you're free to support who you want to support. But I thought it was encouraging that Abdul Carter did not back down. He didn't go after him. He said he wanted to put it, but he said, listen, you're the leader of the team, the face of the team, and what you support, I don't necessarily embrace. But I think that's also, Brian, I think it's the beauty of the locker room. Who knows what the political beliefs are in the Knicks locker room. I'm sure that people have a number of different religious beliefs, philosophical beliefs. But for this run, they said, whatever those beliefs are, the most important thing is winning. So we're going to take all that stuff, leave it outside the locker room, and we're going to play ball. We're going to win this championship. And I think that's a great metaphor of the locker room, that no matter what your political beliefs are, we've got a goal, and the goal is winning the championship. And if we've got to compartmentalize and leave that stuff out here, Jackson Dart's job is to throw touchdown passes. Abdul Carter's job is to sack the quarterback. And, and I
think we're going to go to the ceremony now. Bill, this has been great. Mike Breen, voice of the Knicks, at the podium. Here we go at City Hall.